This is Rain Phoenix with LaunchLeft Podcast. Today, our very special guest is MacKaye of Minor Threat, Fugazi, The Evens, Discord Records. So much to talk about. Let's jump right in. But first, don't forget, rate and subscribe. Follow us on all socials at LaunchLeft. Hi, MacKaye. Welcome to LaunchLeft Podcast. It's really wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here. I've been having a very busy day. What did I do today? I rode my bike out here. It's about 8-mile ride, 40 minutes maybe, 30, 40 minutes, depending on the wind. Got here and then started to work, but then a guy came to fix the furnace. So I had a long conversation with him, and he got the furnace going. And then I put in the storm windows because it's pretty cold today. And I had a problem. I have a leaky window, and I had to go up on a ladder and tack some plastic up over the window. I had to take an air conditioner out. It's been a busy day.
This all happened today. Yeah. Wow, that is a busy day. That is a busy day.
It's still going on. After I actually have a bunch of bills. Actually, we had a guy come visit the office, and then 2 people came by to visit. And then I have to do a bunch of bills, and I have to ride up to my sister's house and pick up the mail. And then she still lives in the house where the Discord address is, the Beecher Street address, the original house.
Yes, I think I met you there. I think I met you there with River when we were on tour, 930 Club, unless I met you before then. I was trying to remember. You have a better memory.
You met me here at Discord House. Yeah, I moved here at this house. I moved from this into this house October 1st, 1981.
Wow.
When we started the label in 1980, I still was living at home. So I used my parents' address. And it's still quite often on the backs of records, even though both my parents are now dead and my sister still lives there. So, but it's just nice to go and pick up the mail and say hello and hang out for a minute. So that's on the agenda tonight. We'll see how it goes.
Every day. I know you have a keen memory, and I was wondering if you remember, when we met, what year it was. My memory is fleeting in that respect. And
I think I believe the first time we met was in Gainesville. But I'm pretty sure you were there because Fugazi played, was it called Brick City maybe? A venue called Brick City? That was probably, I'm guessing 93, maybe 91.
91.
91, right.
Yeah, River passed in 93, so I'm guessing it was 91.
That sounds correct, yeah, because, so 91, and so after the show, we all went off to your ranch, and we were all hanging out, and there was a guy there whose name I don't recall, but he was a teacher in the local high school, and he was a history teacher, and his thing was that he liked to teach in character, so he was at that time teaching 19th century American history. So he was dressed up like a sort of Civil War era kind of guy. And he was talking about all these, like homespun remedies from those days. So he was always in character. And we went for a walk. And at some point he stopped, he was telling us like, well, this here is this and this is that. And then he said, you got to watch out. These are stinging nettles. These are nettles. They'll sting you and they'll sting you good. He says, now the best way to deal with it, go ahead and have to urinate on your leg. Wherever the nettles, you got to pee on it. And we're like, okay, that seems reasonable. And then so we walk a little while longer, and all of a sudden he's like jumping up and down because he got stinging nettles. He got stung. So we all just stood there and we're waiting. He's like, and he took out and pissed on his own leg. It was great. I also remember that your brother Joaquin was there. He came in late. He came in really late, and we were all hanging out. And as I recall, there was kind of the building we were in, there was kind of a large room with a kitchen there's an open spacing with a kitchen in the corner, like with a little low kind of counter. And he was making eggs or something. And he was standing there making
scrambled tofu. Scrambled tofu.
Maybe tofu. Yeah, sorry, tofu. Yeah, right. The reason I remember is it was a frying pan. And he was standing there, and he was pretty disheveled. And he was standing there, and then he fell asleep standing up. And we saw smoke, and someone was like, Joaquin. And he looked up and he lifted the spatula, but the spatula had melted to the frying pan. And he was like, ah, That's
Oh
what I
my
remember the
gosh.
first time I met. That's the first time I remember meeting you all. Then the next
Wow.
time I saw you all, I think was we played in LA, Fugazi again. And I think it was probably the Rockford Choice gig in early January of '93. And you all were recording.
Yeah.
You were recording, I think, in a studio that used to be owned by the Jackson Five or the family, the
Wow.
Jackson. It was where they recorded. It was some house up in the valley that had a recording studio that had been previously owned by somebody. I think the Jacksons, anyway, or maybe some other musical family. But River said, "Oh yeah, let's go. Come visit. We'll go out to dinner." And so it was. I think you were there, and your mom was there, and I forgot who else. But we all drove to a Greek place somewhere in the valley, and I was driving, and we were all in the van all together. And we pulled up in front of the place, and it was on a boulevard that was just empty. It was like late. It was like a late. It was like 8:30, late for dinner in LA. And so, and there was just empty boulevard. And River said, "Have a valet park it." And I said, "I forgot him." No, I insist. So I really got out of the van. I handed the guy the keys. And he just moved it 10 feet up and parked right there on the street in front. I was like, I don't understand this. But it was a great hang. We had a really, really nice time with you all.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's funny because those are the kind of weird little, like, those kind of, like, memories that are really they're cinematic in a way. They're little details that stick with my brain. And they're sweet. They're all really sweet memories.
Oh, that's awesome. Also, I mean, the one memory I have was coming up. I think it was when we were on tour. We did something called the Mid-East Tour because we toured up from Gainesville all the way to New York and back down. And we stopped in D.C. We played 930 Club, and I think we visited you at the Discord House. If I'm not mistaken, I remember sitting on the steps with you and River and the band. And that was probably 91 as well. So maybe that was after that Fugazi in Gainesville part or right before.
I would think. I'm sure the first time I met you all was in Gainesville.
In Florida.
Were you there?
Yeah.
I think you were. Yeah, I remember you. Yeah.
Yeah.
There was another friend too that was hanging around. I can't remember who it was. It was great. And it was also nice to find, like, I had finding fellow sort of vegan travelers at that time was really, really nice. Like, just because I think at that point, like, the entire time I was in Fugazi, and to this day, I was a vegan guy. And so it was really great hanging out and just knowing like, oh yeah, that's just what we eat, and it's swell.
Yeah.
But yeah, you would have come here. Did you play? I thought you played Black Cat. Did you play 930?
We did both. I remember we did play 930, but yeah, I think we did both because I'm pretty sure we did that run twice, or we did like up and back down. Maybe we stopped at a different on the way down. That was a really fun, memorable tour. And so that's my one memory, was actually meeting you in DC at the Discord House. It's nice to hear of two other times that I'm sure I was around, but my memory does not serve as well as yours. So I'm glad you have those snapshots.
I do remember at one point, I think you were making a movie, I think. I feel like at one time I feel like you were doing a movie somewhere. Did you make some movies right around that time?
Yeah, even Cowgirls Get the Blues with Gus.
Right, that one. Yeah, that's right. I think that's when was that? Right around that era?
Yeah, it was like 91, 92, I think. 91, maybe. Yeah. It didn't come out till 93. But yeah, I was in Oregon. So maybe I missed the Gainesville hang, or maybe I missed I don't know. That's interesting. Well, thank you for contextualizing and helping my memory. I was so curious. I was like, what do you remember? Because I just remember DC. I remember you guys
Yeah.
playing in Gainesville, though. Like I've seen you a number of times. As a matter of fact, when I was home recently, I was going through. When I went to visit my mom, I was going through old photos and found a bunch of Fugazi live, like 35 millimeter photos that some were terrible and they made it to the burn pile, but I believe I saved some of them because I was like going through and like discarding stuff that I didn't think would. And then what's funny is there's a whole entire Instagram site dedicated to Fugazi live photos of 35 millimeter. And I was like, I probably shouldn't have tossed some of those. They probably would have loved to post them. But it was a house cleaning day.
I have if you get to toss any of them, toss them my way, because I have an enormous archive. I have a digital archive and a physical archive of photos. And, I don't know if you've ever looked at the Fugazi Live series site. Well, about 12 years ago, we created a site that has a page for every show we ever played, who opened, how many people were there, what the door price was, if it was a benefit or not. And we did about 1,050 shows around there, over 1,000 anyway. And then of those, we have I think almost 850 recordings are posted. The show recorded, and there's photos, flyers, scans of tickets. You should look at it. It's FugaziLiveSeries.com.
Okay.
It's an enormous undertaking. If you're, from my point of view, it's an amazing research thing because it really helps contextualize time, because you can search under Gainesville, for instance, and see every time we played Gainesville. You can search under Florida, see every time we played Florida. You can search by state, city, year, country. You can even search by venue, and you can search by song.
So and you did this.
How many times?
You did this archive all by your lonesome, or your team? That's
well, I've worked with different people over the years. I mean, I'm the boss. Like, I'm the one that kind of tends to it still, but there was a number of different people who've worked on it. But originally, we had a sound guy named Joey P, and he was really a committed engineer, and he just wanted to record all the shows. In the beginning, it was interesting to hear the shows because we didn't have records out in the very beginning. So our first year of touring, we had no record. We just played shows. So it was nice to hear them in like a live context, but we didn't. I mean, honestly, after you play a show, the last thing you want to listen to is a recording of the show. So we just started to accumulate these tapes, and it just became a tradition that we just were always recording. And I ended up with boxes and boxes and boxes of tapes in my closet. And at some point, we were like, what are we going to do with all these tapes? And we discussed doing a live album. This was around 1999 or 2000. We thought about doing a live album, but we got very involved with the question of what is the criteria for this. So is it the best sounding recording? Is it the best performance? Is it the most interesting performance? Is it the most sort of insane sounding performance? Is it, there's like so many different criteria. Do we do with one show, or do we do like songs from different shows? Do we do interstitial madness? Like there's all this talking and stuff. And it became we were frozen by it. We couldn't actually go forward with the idea. It was too much to think about. And then, so we just skipped it. And then when we stopped gigging in 2000, our last shows were in November 2002. We were sort of like, well, people are looking for things to do. And Joe Lally, the bass player, said, I'd like to, what can I do? And I said, why don't you do like a live series CD release? So we picked like 30 of those out of hundreds and hundreds of tapes. We picked 30 just randomly. And he made, CDs of them. And people liked it. It was a cool little thing to have. And, we sold quite a few of them, but it just felt insane because, there's hundreds of them and we only made 30, and it's so much fucking plastic, and it's not into plastic and making more stuff. And then, we let that go. And some years went by, and there was a guy named Peter Alexic who was an archival art student from NYU, and he was looking for a project. And he came and got all the tapes into a database. And he really helped me get things organized in a way that was, you could actually have, like, you could see the way that what the tapes were, and you could identify each one. And then that was like, oh, now let's organize a live series site. And so every show had a database number, and then we had to find the audio number and the show number and line them up. But we realized that with the internet, you can have single source infinite copies, and there's no plastic necessarily, or there's no plastic like a CD. Understood that there's other environmentally complicated situations with all computers and all things, but mostly it just wasn't making instant trash, and and that just set it free. And then we were off to the races, because I booked the band, and I had kept pretty meticulous records of every show we played, and I had all of this information, so I was able to create a database with all that information in it, and then we were able to populate it with photos and flyers and ticket scans. We have comment sections, and then we put the shows, the music in, and the response has been great. Although it's funny because it's a huge site, it has over 1,000 pages, but because the internet is an infinite well, it's not even a raindrop. It's just something that people are like, oh, I had no idea about it. They're like,
yeah. Oh, I'm going to check that out.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
That I've spent thousands of hours on this project, and yet I can't hold it in my hand.
Well, and I have to say hats off to not creating more plastic waste, though. I know that, like you said, it's complicated. We're using electricity and there's all kinds of other waste, but you can't, we live in the modern age, and so that's the way it goes. But at least, yeah, I was really hell-bent on always doing eco wallets, those like more paper ones, but then try to use recycled paper and soy ink, and then it just gets so expensive. You're like, okay, I can only make one run, which is also, I know you do a lot of limited run things, which I really like too, because then it makes it more rare, But
we actually don't do them as limited runs. My position is we don't make trash, and so I don't know if you ever heard me. People, sometimes I'll talk and I'll say, well, what do you call a record that you don't listen to? It's a piece of fucking trash, right? Because it's just an object that has no purpose. It's just sitting there. It's just shaped trash. And so my feeling has always been not that we're trying to make things rare, but rather we're trying to really think about, like, how many people want to hear this? And, because records require certain numbers of pressings, on an economic level, usually 1,000 or 500 or 1,000. So it doesn't get, if you do like 50, you can do that, but it'll cost a fortune. And then it becomes like a boutique item. So if we do 500 or 1,000 or something, then we just think, okay, how many people are going to want to buy this? And if 800 people want to buy it, great. Those records, we never think in terms of making them limited. What we think about is the rejection of the industry standard, which is to make too many.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's the real. We just did that because then, in the record industry, there's warehouses filled with records that will never be, or CDs that'll never be listened to, and they're just waiting to go into a dump. I remember, do you remember when Bruce Springsteen put out the Triple Live record? It was a box set. Do you remember this at all in the 80s? Maybe
I was such a kid. Yeah, 10 or something.
Yeah, well, I worked at a record store, so I didn't listen to the record, but I knew them all. And Springsteen had done some triple album thing. I think it was a live thing. And it didn't, coming off of his other records, which were huge, it just didn't sell that well. And at some point, I was talking to a guy who worked in the industry, and he said that, well, I can't remember what his label is, but said that they had warehouses filled with those particular titles. They couldn't sell them. And I thought, my God, it's horrible. It's not, because I never think records if you make, 10,000 records and you sell 1,000, it's not a failure of a record. It's a failure of production. Like if you write a song, if I write a song and somebody wants to hear it, that's an incredible success. And if I can emboss that song into a piece of plastic and 500 people want to buy it, that's a miracle. It's amazing. It's never a question of how many you sell it's not a failure thing. The trick is, the fail is figure out how many to press. That's the question. So I'm definitely not a collector at all. I don't collect records. I actually don't believe in the collector's market. It's weird because many of the records I'm on are extremely collectible, but I think that's not my world. I just don't like it.
Ian, you are truly one of a kind. You do realize how outside the box you are compared to most people. Even hearing you talk about any of the things that you've shared already, like the way that you come to things is so originally different than the way that like the collective society and, what is supported in terms of society, the way that everyone else comes at it. And I have always been so inspired by that and moved by that. To me, you're like, here's something that, and there's a question in this, but an observation I had about you, because I was listening to some of your other conversations and interviews with others, and I had this moment where just the words punk Buddha came up, because I felt like you talked about impermanence. You talked about the importance of, for you personally, that you're in the moment. You're not thinking like, what is this going to mean in 5 years, right? And you realize that everything, what goes up must come down, that discord, while it's still thriving now, it might not be in the future, that you basically like, yeah, you like, in many ways, it was like pointing out very similar things to like Buddhist tenets, which I thought was so wild, but set in a punk rock ethos. And I couldn't help but wonder, and if you don't want to answer, that's fine, but if you have a spiritual practice, because my thought was, people spend like years in retreat trying to cultivate the qualities that you espouse as like, this is just how I live my life. I don't understand why everyone is asking me these questions that is not even interesting to me. This is my version of what the answer. And I was so struck by that literally the words punk rock Buddha came up. And I thought, I wonder if he'd be open to sharing if he either has a spiritual practice, and the second part to that is whether you believe in reincarnation.
I'm not a subscriber to anything. I think that people often say, "Oh, you have you have really Christian ethics, or whatever." And I'm like, actually, the ethics predate Christianity, in my opinion. The principles of whatever the Buddhist principles are predate Buddha, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Like, I think that religions or spiritual practices, they survey what comes naturally in life, and then they say, well, this seems like a good idea. Let's make this part of our practice. And then it gets into this imprimatur, like this is a Christian thing, like the do unto others as you have them do unto you, whatever. And that becomes a Christian tenet. But actually, in my mind, it's a human tenet. It's just, it predates and wherever the Christian thing got started. So I have no spiritual practice at all. And reincarnation, no, I don't think of it in terms like that. I don't have any, I feel like that, I think for me, life and death are both incomprehensible states. They will always be that. And my sense is that the real mission is to make peace with incomprehensibility, to find peace with it and be okay with it. We don't need, like, if you look out, I'm looking out the window right now and I'm seeing like trees and I see birds and stuff. And we're used to it and we think, okay, that's not natural. But really, when you think about it, it's completely insane. Like these things flying around and things sprouting in hundreds of, dozens or hundreds of feet into the sky. We make peace with that stuff, but we can't really understand. I can't understand how this thing works, or the computer or light bulbs. I don't understand any of it, but I accept it. So I make peace with that. And I think that I feel like the reincarnation, that concept, and it's fun. And if people, I feel like people with spiritual practices, if it brings them some, if it's a vessel that helps them navigate the waters, great. I'm all for it. But I don't, I just think that I hope that those vessels are constructed out of belief and not fear. Because I think that fear vessels are just not anywhere I want to be near,
Yeah. Well, I mean, hearing you talk only kind of solidifies my initial, thoughts about you more, because I couldn't agree more with you that, like, basically and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like what you're saying is these are all inborn qualities and every human has access to them. You don't need some external thing to awaken those qualities. They live in you. It's just acceptance of the insanity, magical insanity of life and death, like just accepting those things. And that is, at the core of many very practiced spiritual people. They're aware of that too. That's all that is. The practice is a vehicle to uncover what's there, and what's there is, why wouldn't we do unto others as we'd want done unto us? Why wouldn't, all these things that, but it gets corrupted very easily because the ego marches in and says, like, we need to make a thing of this. We can make money off this. We can do, and those are those other qualities that are obviously alive in the human animal. But I think what you're talking about is really, really powerful, which is awareness of who we really are. Like just being open to going, like, actually, at the end of the day, why wouldn't I do something kind if that's what I want to have happen in my life? Or why wouldn't I treat someone well? And why would I take money or charge for something or be gross about anything if that would feel icky to me, right? You just have this very sure truth in you that I think is really refreshing and wackadoodle. In this world, you are definitely a weirdo fringe, and I love you for it.
I'm a weirdo, no question about that. I think that, I do think that I'm very early on in my life, and I'm talking about like 12 or 13 years old, I just realized that I was like overwhelmed with the enormity of, I started to think about like stars and what heaven was, or all the, I realized it was overwhelming for me, what death meant, and I realized, wow, I can't tangle with this. I can't tame it anyway. And I thought, at some point I realized, it's nothing. It's all nothing. This is all, like, I just look around and think, well, we're all born in a very simple way and equal. And we're born to work. We're made to work for the most part. Our bodies and our minds are made, that's what they do. And then, from that point on, you start collecting, you're either endowed with, or you start collecting ideas or practices diets or religions or all these accoutrements, all these add-ons, all these sort of things that are either placed on us or that we gather up ourselves. But they're all, in my mind, it's all nothing really. And so with that is for me, a really like, it makes me feel good, like knowing it's all nothing. So then I think, okay, with that in mind, do well and be well. That's it. That's my, I don't see any reason. I don't see any reason to be ugly in the world at all. And, and I think that, punk rock for me was and is such the right place for me, because it was the place where people were really challenging conventional thinking, and they were kind of, I was so excited to find people who gave a fuck, who cared, because it seemed like everything in rock and roll world was just about making money or getting laid or whatever. And I found it really, that seemed trite and abusive. Whereas within the punk world, even though it has many shades, and there's a lot of people who are involved with punk who are kind of a handful. For me, what really was interesting about it was that it was a countercultural thing. And you said it earlier, like you said, you're really different than like what's most of society, right? Exactly, because most of society is the mainstream, and the mainstream is in many ways what has been cultivated by the corporate machinery. So let's not do that. That's how let's not, like, I often look at situations, people are like, well, you have to do this. Like, I'm like, well, in that case, I'm definitely not doing that. Someone said, well, you have to do it this way. If you can't, I mean, Fugazi was like a ongoing kind of celebration of pushing it back in people's face, because at the very beginning, they said, well, you can do this now. You can do a $5 door now, but you're not going to be able to do this in a year. And we did. We continued to do it. And they said, like, well, you can run the band now, but at some point you're going to have to get management. But we didn't. Or you have to get a publicist, but we didn't. Or your label won't do that. But they're wrong. And the reason when people say that, I think they're really, what they're either repeating what they've heard, or they came to a certain point in their own lives or careers in which they felt scared, and they chose something out of fear. But then when someone else comes along, they're like, well, you're crazy to do that, because that's their fear, not my fear. I think it's way more interesting to just try to have creative response, to try to think of other ways to navigate things. Here's the thing about, I never really used the word DIY, do it yourself. It's not really, like, even though it's a tenet that's been placed on me, it's not really something that I was like, DIY, it's not really my, I don't know. I just never thought about it like that. But taking it DIY at face value, the operative words are fucking do it. And that's the thing about, like, what I think most people don't really understand is that, like, we work. Like what I told you today, I was like putting in storm windows and fixing, doing home repair. And then for the last 2 weeks, I've been packing records, and I was in the studio, and I'm like, writing royalty checks. It's an enormous amount of work. But that's the gift.
Mm-hmm.
That's the gift. Can you imagine that you made some music 40 some years ago and people still give a damn? And I think,
pretty cool.
Well, if they give a damn, so do I.
Yeah, I love that. It's about something deeper. It's about the passion that comes from any artist to create, and the work. It's really about the work. And so thank you so much for sharing that, because it's so in line with really why we're here.
I do want to clarify, just to be, this is something I always like to, like, I'm in no judgment of other people and how they navigate.
Yeah. I know that about
people
you too.
I know people who are involved with some of the biggest bands in the world, and they work so hard. And I am in awe of their work ethic and their talent and their belief and their, I don't mean to suggest, I don't mean to suggest that, my way is the right way and there's someone else's is not. It's not the case whatsoever. What I can tell you is that my ways are the right way for me. And part of my situation or our situation is that it was art. It was the art of necessity, right? Because, we grew up here in Washington, D.C. None of our parents were involved with the music business. I mean, I was 17. Let's see. I just turned 18 when we started working on when the record label started to kind of develop. And I did not know, I don't know anything about music business whatsoever, and nobody did. So we approached it as young punk kids, making it up as we went along. So it was really the way we do things. I mean, people often say, why do you do it that way? Why don't you just have somebody else do that? I don't know. It's just the way I've always done it. And it's just the way I am. And I think, I'm a little bit of I've often, you said it earlier, I'm wackadoodle, but I'm just weird. That's just the way I like to do things. And it doesn't bother me. I don't look at the, I don't look at the tour bus with wanting eyes. I don't think, oh my gosh, if only, I could, I just don't think like that. Yeah. I think that this is my life and this is what I do. I like it. I'm endlessly engaged with and interested in. I'm happy to see my people. DC people are very deep. We go way back together. Every Sunday morning, I take a walk with a friend of mine that I've known since 76 or something. And he was an early punk with me. And, I talked to Rollins. Rollins and I our friendship just turned 50.
Wow.
We met when I was 11 and he was 12. And we talk every week,
Wow.
This is a deep, old friendships. And I think for me, a lot of what was involved with what music meant for me was an ability to, with these other people, create an extended family, and almost blood relatives, honestly. And I think I was desperate for community, real community. Growing up in Washington, D.C. is strange. It's a strange town because there's the federal government, which is sort of that's the big company in town. It's sort of like in L.A., like Hollywood is the big company in town. And so that's really the economic, the spread is the tree is the federal government, and everything else is sort of grows in or around it. And but my family were not government people, and I don't know, I'm not involved with the federal government at all. To me, they're just something you got to put up with in this town. I'm a Washingtonian. I'm a fifth generation Washingtonian, and I think that growing up here, most of my friends were I can't wait to get out of here and move to New York. But I wasn't going to go to New York. My family was all here, and I thought, well, I don't want to go to New York. Why can't we just have the things here? Why do we have to go somewhere for the things? And I think at some point it just became clear. Oh, well, let's just do it. Let's do it ourselves. I remember Thurston Moore was working on a book of poetry, and he asked me if I would write a poem about punk. And I said, sure. And do you want to hear my poem about punk?
Sure.
You ready?
Yeah.
Because we said so.
I love it. I love it. But you do realize how completely, outside the mainstream that is, and that you stayed true to that is probably one of the harder things. In a way, people might start that way because I said so, but then success means you're adopting more you're getting more help, you're getting more money, you're growing, right? And you were able to do that through maintaining, because we said so, all the way through. Like you still, your audiences grew, your popularity grew, and you didn't jump on the, as a growing band, you have to do this bandwagon. Now, again, I hear you. That was your choice. You have no judgment. Another thing I really value about the way that you navigate through life is that you aren't trying to compare and despair or make judgments against others.
But I have to say we were all marginalized. Like,
Yeah.
I think for me, like, in my mind, they're marginalized for a variety of reasons, and I was one of them. I was a freak. I knew that, but I wanted to find a family of freaks to be a part of. And just to clarify, I often tell people, "Oh yeah, my family was really supportive, or my parents were supportive." But I should underscore, when I say that, it's not code for they paid my way. My family, my parents were broke by the time I was old enough to go to college. I didn't go to college because my dad said, if you go to college, you got to get loans. And I said, well, I'm not going to, if I get a loan, then I got to pay it back. I had this realization when I was in high school. I probably was in 10th or 11th grade. And I had this experience where I thought I was going to be hit by a car, and it turned out to be a sonic illusion. I don't know what the hell that was about, but it didn't change that moment of like freeze where you think you're about to get killed. And then sort of afterwards, sort of contemplating, well, what if I had been killed? And I thought, my God, if I had been killed that moment, I would have spent the majority of my sort of comprehensive, cohesive life existing in my time being shaped by an institution, school. Like, it was just a shape. This time every day was school. Weekends were weekends because you weren't going to school. Summers had a shape because they're between times you're going to school. And I thought, it just seems not at all what life is supposed to be. And then I thought, why on earth do people, after 12 years of having their time shaped by institution, do they then voluntarily go to 4 more years? And then if they borrow money, they come out of those 4 years and they have to get a job to pay back the loans, which means the rest of their lives is shaped by institutions. And that's not the way I think about time. I think we should own our own time, period. And that we should, and I'm not lazy. I've been up since 5:30 today. I'm not like a guy who's like lolls around, but I also feel like I do what I want to do, when I want to do it, where I want to do it, why I want to do it. I think everyone should try to live like that. But I think we've been structured. It doesn't work for certain models. And so I just want to be clear that my family is supportive because I told them, yeah, I'm not going to go to school. They said, okay, do you have something you want to do with your heart? You know what you want to do? I said, yeah, I'm going to be a punk. I'm going to play music, And they're like, all right, we support your decision. And I think that they were super supportive of me and all my siblings. I have, 3 sisters and a brother, and they were always, for each of us, they said, yeah, you do you. And you always have a home. And I think that's sort of the way I've thought about Discord as always being a home, like a place where, people come by or whatever, they could just know, like, all right, that's still there. It's just anchored. Like, I remember my mom, she died 20 years ago or 19 years ago. But my mom, at one point we were talking, because I used to go up there every Wednesday to her house and we would drink iced tea and play skip bo, or Rummy 500. And we were talking once, and my mother said, people often ask me what I do for a living, and she says, and they asked me if I'm a housewife. And she said, I am not a housewife. I'm a homemaker. She goes, but check those words. I'm a homemaker. I made a home, and I'm here every day. You guys revolve around it. She says, it's a center of activity. That's the work. And I was like, I got it. and I get it. So in the same way, I feel like part of what I'm doing, my work is just being like centered, like here I am. And then people want to pop in, great. If they don't, that's fine too. I always got something to do. I have too much to do that I want to do in my life. So I'm fine. But if they show up at my door, whatever I'm doing can stop, because the whole point was to have a chat.
That's so cool. And I like that interpretation of homemaker. And I can relate to that too and feel that that is so important. I think we need more homemakers, like whatever that looks like for those of, whatever that looks like for what we consider home, whoever the we is, anyone and everyone. Make more home spaces that people feel they can have a great chat, a conversation, a cup of tea, feel like there is community, a family, a sense of belonging. Those things are, and joy, right? So important right now, and in a world that has always been sorrow and mayhem and destruction in many ways.
Of course, beautiful and creative. Let's not forget that. I always say, like, most people were not killed today.
Right.
Like, let's also remember that life is rich, and there's so much good. People are doing so many incredible things all over the world every day, every moment of every day. And it's a shame that among the many natural disasters, fire, flood, hurricanes, and all these terrible sort of catastrophes, that I think you can count among it human brutality. That is a natural disaster. I don't think there's any explanation for it. I can't understand it at all. But it's what the papers write about or the media reports upon. And I think it creates within people a sense that the world is going off the rails, but the world is doing exactly what it's always done. If you look back 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years ago, it's just hellacious.
Yeah.
Hellacious news at all times. But the unbalance, it's good. People are good. They're doing good things. And I don't think doing good while something bad is happening, I just don't agree that is somehow living in denial. It's not living in denial. It's quite the opposite. It's living in an acceptance that life is good and rich, and that's how we should live, and to try to set an example. I mean, I don't know about you, but I've certainly had friends who are hard political workers who are just miserable at all times, and I respect them and I love them, but I don't really want to hang out with them sometimes. But then I meet people who are really politically minded, but they have a sense of joy about them because they know that the point is to make a better world. So that's the way they live, and I think that's where I want to go. Those are the people I want to have.
Couldn't agree more. It's like we need, creating containers of joy, containers of like the goodness that is our humanity, that is life, is so important. While simultaneously the worst, most barbaric things are happening and always have happened. And that's not to negate the barbarity or be callous to it, or like you said, be in ignorance or, turn a blind eye, or just like denial. You used the word denial, but it's to say like, the two have always existed. If we're going to all go towards all the pain and suffering, then we're pushing the negative into the win, right? You kind of need to create joy, pockets of joy, because you have to balance that energy. I think it's sort of like energy work. And I see art and artists as like energy workers, weirdly. And I'm not like studied in that, but I've always felt like that is ultimately, if it was like broken down, artists, like they help correct the balance of like positive, negative energy. Sometimes they go one way and that's needed. And sometimes, we don't even know what we're doing necessarily. But part of it is this like energy dance that we're a part of. And it's part of the collective unconscious. It comes to us when we have opportunities to create joy in times of great stress and pain. That is that's a job. That's like one of the things you wake up early for and do is like, I'm here to make joy. I'm here to show there is an example of another way to live, even during this dire situation. I'm going to bring some light to this intensity, whatever that means for me. Hopefully that just means by showing who I really am. Like you said, life is beautiful and we need to make beauty and feel okay about that. Just keep trying to make beauty from transmuting pain and joy. Like try to make something that speaks to those who need it, whether they're upset or happy. How can we make great things that influence them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's language. It's the language is different for me. I don't ever think about like I don't think about energy works it's just not my. I'm very much like boom, and I just think. But I think you're right. I think that what you're saying seems like it makes it's sort of, yeah, I would agree with those things. I feel, if I was a baker, and there was some sort of catastrophe, my first job would be to construct some way to create an oven to make bread. That's what I do. And and I think that or if I was a carpenter, I would start building and fixing things. But I'm though I'm happy to try my hand at both of those tasks. I don't mind doing that stuff. What comes to me quite naturally is music, whether I'm like making it myself or if I'm helping out other people who are making it. That's the work I can do. That's it. And so I don't ever think in terms of. I don't really think in terms of process or energy or missions or I just not my. I just don't think like that. I just work with what's in front of me, and I don't stand outside of myself very often. I think like for instance, getting this interview together, like you'd written me and I was like, oh yeah. And then I got pulled off into something else. And you wrote me, hey, oh shit, sorry. Yeah. And then eventually like, let's just fucking do this. My brain just gets off into another thing. But it really is, as you probably can see, like, oh yeah, we'll have a chat, and then, cause I only do interviews because people seem to be interested in things. They want to ask me some questions. I'm happy to see people and have a conversation. But by and large, like, most of the record industry, for instance, just in terms of the industry, like when a band tours, they tour on behalf, they'll say, what record are you touring on? Or what are you touring behind? And in my mind, it's completely backwards. Records are put out to give people a sense of what the music is so they come see the shows. You don't play the shows so people buy the record. The record is just it's like a flat plastic thing. It's just like it's a medium that you have it's just the commodity. It's all it is. As if the commodity is somehow superior to the show. To the interaction of it, to the creative interaction, to the possibility of a transformative experience. That's the mission. So I never have toured to promote a record. I just don't give a fuck about that. We played shows and we put out records. Fugazi had a mantra, which was, the record is the menu and the show is the meal. And that was really the way we looked at it. So that's an example. Everything I do is sort of backwards. Like people say with young bands, like, oh, would you put our record out? because it made that we could help make things happen. But my thinking is make something happen, and then we'll make a record. I'm going to turn the light on because it's getting dark over here.
There we go.
But
yeah, I was
it's
about
really-
earlier we were talking about other bands because I asked you, about launching because I know you have such, first of all, great taste. You see so many live, I'm assuming you see a lot of live music. You have a label and you were sharing that you just don't like the idea of like feeling like you're selling anything when you're having a conversation. Like to you just want to have a chat with a friend, or with someone who's interested. Is that right? Do you want to kind of share about that?
I don't have anything to sell. That's all. Even when I talk about we're talking and you ask me like, what do you think about this? And I'll say, oh, well, here's what I'm thinking, but I don't have a fucking book to sell. I don't have like you were talking about like spiritual leaders or people like that. And a lot of times what the trouble they get into is they have like a program that they're actually trying to figure out how to commodify in a way. They have these thoughts and ideas, but it's going to cost you. And that's just not me. It's just not the way I operate. And so I don't really, I'm not looking like the promotional component of this is always for me, the least interesting. I don't care about that. And I think in terms of I think young bands, it's nice when, if you're talking to someone, like if you and I were chatting and I say, oh, you might like this band, it's specific. It would be a personal thing that you and I were just talking. Oh, you might find this band interesting. But in terms of it being a more public thing, it feels in my mind, I want the bands themselves to get the attention. Sometimes bands will say, well, how do you get people, like, how do you sell off records to pay your rent or whatever? And I say, I don't know, write a good song. I don't know the fucking answer to this at all. But what I do know is that if you want people to remark upon your music, you better play remarkable music. That just seems really straightforward. I don't know what that means, or it just means that since there's no clear definition of that, more light. That's an automatic light just turned on. I have this little, see that light just turned on over there.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. I think that what I want is for people to, instead of thinking in terms of, oh, this is what will work, or this will work, or they will try it this way, or do music like this. How about just do what you hear inside your own head or heads and make that music and then mean it and then see what happens. I just talked to a class the other day and they said, do you have any recommendations to a young band? I said, yes, my recommendation is love what you're doing. Love it. Love the music you're making. Love the people you play with. Love it all. Because that way, after a few months or a few years or however long it goes on, and you stop and think, my God, I haven't reached success as I define it, then at least you would have spent your time doing something you loved.
Exactly.
That seems like that's my advice. Like, love it. And
do you know any bands that you feel are doing that right now in your community that you're like impressed? You don't want to say their name? Do you want to share their names here or no? Okay.
I mean, I don't want to leave people out. And
right. Okay.
It's just I'm just not I get it. Like your podcast is called LaunchLeft, and it's like you really are about supporting young artists, which I think is really cool. And I think I'm about that too, but I do it in a different way. It's not just a promotional thing,
Yeah.
I try to,
well, in a sense, that's not either. It's sort of like when you have a lot of respect for artists who have done it their way, like you, who've carved their own lane, who have said, fuck you to the system and this, the strategies and the PR and all of that, and have found their way, them, tipping their hat to someone they think is doing that does give that artist some lift, right? And it does, and it, especially for people we respect.
Long ago, I have tried to eradicate, names, and I just don't talk about people. Like I just in interviews, I just like I might mention my mom, or I might mention, or I might I mention Henry as my friend or whatever. But 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 by and large, like I just I in my life I certainly have said like, oh, this band, these people, blah blah blah, or I might have complained about them or whatever. But then I think, I don't know if it's necessary because it's not really to. And so I think I've just gotten out of the habit of bringing up other people, not out of disrespect. And in fact, again, like as I said, like I feel like that in my own way, I'm certainly supportive of young bands.
Absolutely.
I mean, I've produced. I mean, at this point in my life, I've produced. I don't know how many sessions. I've been in the studio hundreds of times, and with one very peculiar exception, I've never been paid for my production ever, not a dime from anyone.
Wow.
And the only band, and I'm going to mention a band name now because it's from the mid 80s, but there was a band from Lehigh Valley in Pennsylvania called Follow Fashion Monkeys. And they're a cool band, and they were coming down to record at Inner Ear Studios, which is in a basement just about a 10-minute bike ride from here. And so they called me up and they said, we're going to be recording at Inner Ear, and do you want to come? Would you be up for coming to help us? And I was like, I didn't really know the people in the band. I usually only worked with people I knew, but I thought, oh, I'll go over. And I ended up having a really nice time. I spent a couple of days and we made a tape with, I don't know, 9 songs. And I loved it. And at the very end of it, they said, we want to pay you. And I said, well, I've never been paid. I don't want to get paid. Oh no, we insist. And they gave me $50. And I said, great. And I took them out to dinner. So that was sort of I've never been paid for my production ever. And I kind of like it like that. It just means I get to spend time. I get to be in the band for a little while. I get that kind of really intimate experience of creative intimacy. And I have a lot of experience, and obviously I have my own aesthetic, and I'm weird, as you pointed out. So I think people are sort of like, what? You're weird ideas, but that's just how I am.
The world needs more Ian MacKaye's. Like, honestly, just, it's so refreshing. Weird or not, I love weird. I grew up weird, so I feel very at home with you. But it's just wonderfully refreshing to hear you share, and to hear you also, like, through the process of you being in music and art all this time, have, like, if anything, honed more, like pinpointed more what you don't want to say, because it's not really the truth of why you're here. And so you just skip that stuff. It seems like you've figured out what's gets in the way of you continuing to wake up at 5:30 and do you. And I just appreciate that so much. And I hope that people see this episode and can hear that from you, because it's really, I would love to hear of young bands adopting more Ian MacKaye sensibilities than this sort of, but then again, what I like about you too is you're like, I don't care. Everyone to each his own. This is just me, which I also love. But I just think you're a really strong example of what it is to just be and do right by yourself, and hope that affects others in a positive way. But you don't have a dog in the fight, even though you have strong opinions. Like, you're kind of enigmatic in the most, I don't know, important way right now. I think a lot of people need to hear what you have to say, and are hungry to hear what you have to say. And I just appreciate so much that you spent this hour with me, really being earnest about it and sharing, and hearing me talk too much, which is, I bet you weren't ready for that. Because clearly
I was ready for that. You can hold your own. it's not lost on me. I did, um, I think from the very beginning for me, when I've got involved, like first I was a skateboarder in the 70s. And that's how I really get to be tight with Henry. We had a skateboard team together. And it was a bunch of kids in DC, and we made our own team. And we just didn't have any idea that teams were supposed to be sponsored. We thought you just said we're a team. And so we just went out and bought matching mesh black and gold jerseys that didn't have any words on them. We wanted to be a part of a collective, and we just thought like we're a team. And then we would go to these contests out in suburban Maryland, and these kids would be like, "Who are you guys?" We're Team Sahara. Who sponsored you? We're like, what's that mean? We didn't even know what that meant. We had no idea that it was we just thought it was like a street gang, just self-defined, And really what was going on, I mean, I think of, I've said this many times, but skateboarding for me was not a sport and it was not a hobby. It was a discipline, and it taught me a lot about looking at the world and redefining the things around you, understanding the world, the physical world in a different way, because literally, like the ground you were rolling on changed. The surfaces are different. Everything you got to thinking about stuff differently. Pools had a whole other meaning and that was great practice for punk. When punk came along, and I'd always there was never a time in my life where I didn't play music ever. I played piano before I can remember. I've been playing piano, and I'm not a great piano player by any means, but I'm an innate piano player. I just played, and I written songs by the time I was 4 or 5 years old, very simple, rudimentary songs, but I had organized notes in a way and repetition that in my mind were songs, and they did the thing. They brought to me whatever it was that I was seeking. And later, through some, attempts to try to, I guess, put lipstick on the pig or something, like I went to lessons, and it really made me, I was confronted with this idea that what I was playing was not actually real piano because it was informal. And that the piano from this teacher's point of view, it had a capital P. It was a formal version. And what I was playing was not piano. Now, to be clear, I like this teacher. He was a nice guy, and I'm not mad at him. But I'm mad at the fucking system that he came from, because it made me hate the piano. And I quit playing the piano at that point. For a couple of years, I stopped, because it just made me feel bracketed, or it just felt like, why do we have to conform to this weird idea of what's correct? That just seemed wrong to me when it came to something as exquisite as creativity. And then, I thought, well, I'll be in a rock band, but I couldn't figure out how to play a guitar. And it just seemed at that point, bands that were huge, like the Eagles or Fleetwood Mac or whoever, there is some level I can't even begin to. They might as well be astronauts. Like, it has nothing to do. I'm from Washington. I don't know anything about the music business or nothing. I can't understand anything how that happened. But when punk came along, because I had been trained by skateboarding to look at the world differently, punk came along, and I was like, whoa, this I can do. This is music I can play. And these are the people I've been trying to find. These are the people. If anyone's going to be anti-war, they're going to be here. If anyone's going to be anti-homophobia, they're going to be here. If anyone is going to be anti-racist, they're going to be here. This is the place I can find all these people that I've been trying to find. This is the counterculture. This is the real world. And I felt really clear about suddenly this exquisite creativity. I could just make music the way we wanted to make, and other people in general, mainstream society said it's terrible. We're like, good, because it's you can't understand it, and that means more for us, because until the major label planes scouted over the valley and saw all the fertile land that the punks had grown, all the crop that we were growing, until they flew over and decided, oh, we better get some of that. we had a really good run. It was a really nice run. And then we had to put up with them coming in and raiding all the farms and money, and everyone losing their minds and contracts, all that kind of stuff. But it never stops. Punk will never die. It just goes deeper.
Yeah.
And what goes on. So that's always way more interesting for me. Like that's all. Like I understand that at some point, people walk until they can get a ride. But some people just keep walking and they're happy for it.
You're a special human. And I swear it would just be such a, I don't know, wonderful thing if people, I mean, whatever, I'll probably cut this out, but I swear, I know you're not into reincarnation, but there's just like no way you didn't come in with like all these things removed from your core self that everyone else has piled on. And it takes, I know people who like spend time in retreat or in prayer just to try to remove some of the bullshit that covers that truth that you're talking about. It's a very powerful thing that you came in, like knowing that from a young age, knowing that music was transformative for you, that you heard things in your head and you had to make them happen. That was more important than commerce and all the things the world was telling you would make it important. It was the truth, the passion behind it, which I think all real creatives and artists feel that. It is the truth of art. That's the only truth of art. Everything else is bullshit. But for some reason, a lot of people, fall ill to the commercialism of creativity and feel so constantly comparing themselves, constantly feeling other people have it better than them. Why can't they get, and you just kind of, not only don't you do that, but you don't do it as a practice. You just genuinely don't fucking give a shit. And that's the part that's so awesome. Like nobody comes in like that, much less stays that way. Even if they come in that way uncorrupted, they grow corrupted. And you just, that's what I mean by like, you kind of came in with like the crystal, not the ore on the outside. And that's pretty powerful. Whether you observe it or not is fine. I'm just seeing it in you. It's like, wow, you have maintained that. And not because it was hard and you had to make, like from a place of joy of like, that's just not what I'm interested in. I'm interested in making art for art's sake and being with the people I care about, having close relationships, like living my life, seeing the beauty in a bird and a storm and the sunshine. Like you have, some would call it simplistic, but in reality, it's like, actually why we're all here, and you're already just like, yeah, I'm just kicking around being that way. That is not only is that not normal, but it's weird in the coolest way. It's like I venerate that kind of ability to just shell off the bullshit and be true. And I do wish that, I know you teach, sometimes you go in and talk to kids at school. I wish there was a course that you could give, but at the same time, like, it's just your example. I'm also just so impressed that for you, it's genuinely just who you are.
I sometimes think about like, someone was talking the other day and they were saying like, well, we all have a dark side, or we have dark. And I was like, I guess, I don't know. I don't know if I have a dark side. I don't know. I don't know if we all, and I actually don't know if we all have a dark side. I think that people say that. Now, sure, there's times where, I might be a little blue. I get depressed sometimes, or I'd be like, oh man, I have too much to do that I can't finish, or whatever, whatever.
Right.
There's, but I don't think that is like, I guess I don't see that as a dark side. I see that as, it's like having a little bit of a cold or something, and it'll get better. You just get some rest and drink some tea and you'll be all right. You don't need, there's nothing to worry. It's okay. Like it's all natural. It came out of me. It's got to be natural, but it is true. I am just me. I just do what I do. And I don't really, and I think that I drive some people crazy because they're like, oh, Jesus, he just won't, he's just not going to do it. But I'm not. And I don't really like when, like I started playing with Amy and I started playing with the evens. I remember just we were talking about it, and it's like, I just don't want to deal with clubs anymore. So we just didn't play clubs. And people are like, you can't do that. But the way I look at it, like clubs, like I have a lot of friends who run clubs. I've seen had amazing experiences in clubs, but most clubs, the economic engine is based on self-destruction. That's just a reality, right? Like the sale of alcohol, which is by far like the driving economic engine for most clubs, almost all clubs, alcohol it could be a self-destructive force. And
let me ask you this. My sister's opening Stay, the first zero proof bar in the old Hong Kong cafe in Los Angeles. So it's zero proof, like it's a bar, but there's no alcohol.
What's zero proof mean? Oh, it's like a tincture bar that has no alcohol in it?
Yeah, they make mixology, they have mixed drinks and all, but none of it, zero alcohol. And it's at the old Hong Kong cafe, which was the punk rock sort of enclave in
I played there in 1980.
Oh my gosh. Well, come back and play Stay.
It's funny. Yeah, I did play there I played there in 1980 back in.
Amazing.
That was amazing. But the what I was going to say was, it was not lost on me that music I think of music as a form of communication that predates language, right? That's what I think. I think music is sacred, and sacred before the Christians got a hold of that word. Mm-hmm. So I feel like music has attended every important event in the history of the world. And until maybe just over 100 years ago, there was no way to buy music at all. You could listen to it, you could play it, you could read it, but you couldn't buy it. It wasn't until they figured out how to electricity and record players. So that's when you could start buying music. So, but here's this form, this creative form. And then if you chose this form of music, it had to be performed almost always in a bar or a club. And if it'd be like, and I used to say, it'd be like if you were a poet, but the only way to do poetry readings were in crack houses. Like that's the only place you could do poetry reading. And I thought that's crazy. Music should be everywhere and anywhere. So when Amy and I, we just got a little PA and we got our own lights, little like house lamp things, and we just played anywhere. We never played clubs. We just played other places. Now, it comes at a cost, because part of going outside of the system is that you then you don't have the kind of the support, like the economic support. You don't have the you don't have like the PA system is that we have this little crappy PA or whatever. But so probably we cut our legs off at the knees a little bit in terms of how popular the events were going to be, in terms of numbers, but in terms of experiences, you haven't lived until you played a thrift shop in Ventura or a natural history museum in Utica or something. Like those, those experiences are incredible. And so I feel like that, like the idea, and I kept thinking, like, play music anywhere and everywhere, because then it means other people have, like, you want to talk about LaunchLeft, like give people, because the problem with clubs is that clubs require, like, your audience is their clientele. So if you don't have an audience, they don't have a clientele. So new ideas don't have audiences because they haven't been thought of yet.
Yeah, so, I agree with that.
So you need to have a place. This is what punk was for me, was a place where new ideas were presented and people were here just would gather and say, give us the new idea,
Exactly.
And we don't talk about profit. And that's really, so so for me, the idea of being somebody who's a known musician, but then playing in these weird places, I hope it gives people some sense like, well, shit, this is possible. They could do it here. They could do it there. And then it opens up avenues. Like ultimately, it's about being a pilot light.
Thank you, Ian MacKaye. I needed to hear that.
Sure.
Wow, how amazing was that conversation with Ian MacKaye. And now we're back launching Sam from the Bobby Lees, Escape Artist Lovers, my band, got to play a few dates with them on what is their last run. They've thrown in the towel, and we're going to get into that here on LaunchLeft Podcast. See you on the other side. Hi, Sam from the Bobby Lees. Welcome to LaunchLeft. Welcome to LaunchLeft Podcast. How are you?
I'm fine enough. How are you?
Good. I know you just played what was your last show, the Bobby Lee's last show, supposedly. We don't think so. We don't want that to be true, but that's what we hear. How do you feel?
It's been a process, but I'm with you where I don't know what last means. Like last for right now. It is weird. This is our first time where we don't have any plans to tour. I mean, like we have no shows next year, and we've been playing consistently for the last 6-7 years. So that's weird.
Yeah.
To not have shows. How were the shows for you?
Oh my God. We had so much fun. Thanks for having us. Really. It was amazing for us to just be in your fan group. Even you have the best fans. I wanted to just get into a little bit why you didn't book into 2024 and what was the impetus for kind of calling it quits, if you don't mind sharing.
Sure. Yeah, we had posted a letter we had written, kind of buzzed. How do I put this simply? We've had a few moments of shit. Okay, we thought once we hit this benchmark that we'd start making some money. Or, for instance, we did a tour this spring, a US tour, and we sold out most cities, places we'd never been before, San Francisco, Seattle, places like that. And we came home with no money because we're on a small label. No one gives us money for tour support or records or what. We pay for everything ourselves. So it was just kind of I felt like I've been chasing an invisible carrot the last few years, thinking that once you get to this imaginary level, then there's monetary success. And so seeing the reality of that, going to Europe our second time and selling out most of those shows and coming back with no money, it was just okay, so this is a hobby, but we're treating it like it's our job. This is our number one priority. We can't do other jobs. Most of us do other things when we can around it, but we can't and to anything else when we're doing this. So it just became it just was shit. Okay, this isn't, and then it felt to me really simple. It makes sense. If most people aren't paying for this thing, of course there's no business unless you're at the top of the pyramid and, on a major label that's, has shares in Spotify and basically owns it. And, unless you're a part of that system, which we're not, you can't benefit from it. So yeah, it was just kind of a process of shit. And then, okay, we have to take a break, because everyone needs to pay rent and live.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I find it is really, disturbing how difficult it is if you're not in that elite group that you mentioned, to survive and to play music as a job or, to be an artist. It's just it's not supported here in this country. I know in Canada it is, and I know overseas, there are ways to get grants or different things, but it's much harder to be a U.S. band on the road and do much more than break even. So with that, are you, I assume that music is a huge part of your life and a huge part of what you want to be doing. Are you looking to kind of spend some time more looking towards movies or TV while you take a break to just make ends meet, or is there a plan?
Yeah, no plan. But I love to work on films when I can, but I have no control over how frequent that is. You and I had talked about,
Yeah.
You kind of don't have a choice when something makes sense for you and works out. starting earlier this year, I started writing a new project and songs that definitely wouldn't work for the band. And I recently just shared them with Kendall, and she was really into them. But I'm doing them with this guy in California named Dave Sardi, and he's just been finding weird beats and stuff. It's kind of in an MIA lane, I guess. I don't know, but I've been having so much fun writing to that, and it's free. You know, it doesn't require like a band going into a studio, and so he's been sending me stuff, and I've been writing to that. So I have like enough for an EP but it's like shit. Like, how do I put that out? It sucks to just throw something online and be like, there you go. But at the same time, I believe in making the work and then putting it out. And if that's the only way right now, that's the only avenue we have to put it out. I don't know. I guess I'll probably cave and put it on Spotify next year. But I don't know. But yeah, so I guess I'm still writing stuff. I still also have songs that are definitely for the band. We're just all in a place of, we've paid for every record we've made, and we've wanted to do it in a way where we got to go to a studio. And the first two we did on tape. The last one wasn't so precious. We did it the way the producer Vance Powell wanted to do it, digitally, and I was actually really happy with that too. So we're open, but we just, no one can like commit to that and spend our own money to make a record. We're just like burnt out. We did it 3 records in a row, and it's kind of like, so I don't know. This new stuff, I'm working on that. MacKaye's got a metal band called Firing Squad, I think it's called, and he's been playing with them, and I think they're working on a record. And Kendall and him have been playing backup for John Spencer on his touring band. So everyone's just kind of trying shit out, moving the energy around, and then we'll see what lands, you know.
I'd love to know how music found you originally.
But like my first exposure ever, or
yeah, like how did it find you? Because I think often with musicians, there's that moment where you realize how important it is and how important it will be in your life.
Yeah. My dad and I bonded. I spent a lot of time with him growing up. My mom worked like crazy, and he got me into Little Richard. That was his favorite. And when I was really little, he took me to see him in Las Vegas. And I remember it was like one of the coolest experiences ever. Cause he reminded me of my grandma, cause he wore so much makeup, and he had this like crazy light, like shooting out of his eyes. It was like, he was like a rocket. And I remember that. And I remember being like, oh my God, that was the coolest thing I've ever seen. And then I found like, I don't know, the Stooges. I really loved Iggy Pop when I found that. Whenever I get asked this question, I always like blank on everything, but Elvis, Patsy Cline, I listened to a lot. Bo Diddley, I really liked. More recently, like a few years ago, I found The Birthday Party. I was late to the party on that one. I really like them. Stevie Wonder, big fan of him. I don't know. Like My Chemical Romance, the band makes fun of me for that one, but I have a real, like, I love that band. Yeah, I like a lot of different things.
And what was the point where you realized you wanted to make music, or that you started writing or feeling compelled to?
The point, it's, I don't know why that's a hard thing. It wasn't like because I saw someone playing live and went, wow. And then my initial thing was, I could never do that. Like, I really felt like I couldn't do that. That's like amazing. I had severe confidence issues as a child. Like, gym class was my worst time in life, like being so nervous about being picked for anything. I had real fear about like being in front of people performing. So I knew secretly that's what I wanted, but I also, the fear was so insane that I was like, I'm never going to be able to do that. So it wasn't until I had a severe mental breakdown from alcohol. And then when I came out of that and got sober, I was like, fuck it. I'm going to try this stuff. Yeah.
Well, you know that you're part of the Ian MacKaye episode. We spoke to Ian for actually a long time. It's a really intense and amazing conversation, I felt. So I'm curious if you have any knowledge of Fugazi or like that band, or
I love their music. Yeah. But I don't know any of the I figure I'll listen to this episode and I know nothing about him.
I found it incredibly inspiring because there are very few people like him who, a lot of what he talked about was just doing the work, not worrying about anything else, one foot in front of the other. I mean, I know from, obviously he had a lot of success, but he never grew it on purpose. Like he's just a very enigmatic rock star because he kind of refused all the tropes that most rock stars are waiting for. And he's just managed to maintain that through all the different ways that the industry has gone since the 80s, which it has done much shifting and changing. He's maintained that. So I think you'll find it really inspiring. And I felt like the Bobby Lees and how electric you all are as performers, but also how magnetizing you are as the lead singer. And there was something about the combination of you and Ian MacKaye that just felt like it had to be on the same episode. Like I think there's something kismet, and so I hope that you end up really enjoying the conversation as much as I did. And yeah, I just wonder if you have any advice before we jump off, any advice for people. I know we're going to play one of your songs out, but for young artists or anyone who's trying to get into it, like any thoughts you have that can help people keep their heads up in this ever-changing landscape that is not all that forgiving.
Yeah, I guess what I did, if you have low confidence or even feel like you're not actualizing your creative purpose, I read The Artist's Way. That was very helpful for me. I always give that a plug just because I don't think I would have. As soon as I finished that book, that's when I started the Bobby Lees. So it was definitely like a direct thing. And then for people that are not, in fear and ready to do it, I've finally, like you mentioned, how Ian was saying, it's taken me a while to get to a place of remembering, oh, it's just about the work. It's just about the song. That's it. It's just make a song that I think is cool, that I like, that I want to listen to. And the rest is bullshit. And it feels good to get back to that space. And that's how the first record started. But then we were kind of chasing this idea of hoping, not that that's an insane thing. I mean, the first one we did, I printed it myself. We sold our own vinyl. We booked our own tours. We did that, for a while. And then maybe because it wasn't, when he was putting it out, it wasn't enough to like keep it going. We needed a little push. And I think for me, I fell into a trap of thinking there was like this, like, it's like the Wizard of Oz thing, you think there's this thing that you're going towards and it's just a guy behind it's not that thing. So, but then again, everyone has to, I think, learn that themselves. I can't be like, it's all bullshit out, it's everyone's own, path. But yeah, I guess that's all. Yeah. Hi, this is Sam from the Bobby Lees, and this song is called Radiator. It's the first song we made.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, Sam, for being on the show.
Thank you, Rain.
All
Bye-bye.
right. Bye.
Hey, little radiator. LaunchLeft aims to create an intentional space that highlights and empowers all artists for whom radical creativity is not a choice, but a necessity. LaunchLeft begins with music, but its ultimate aim is to launch left-of-center artists in all creative fields.